Today, I'm going to tell you a story so haunting it lingers, so powerful it reshapes destiny, set deep in the American West, where dust clings to memory and silence hides danger. It unfolds in a hidden valley, a place where outlawed lives and forbidden gifts collide, where survival depends on choosing who you truly are. It all began with a single scar, small enough to be ignored, yet strong enough to awaken forces that could no longer stay buried. Before we kick off this adventure, don't forget to hit like on the video and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. The sun sagged low over Cedar Ridge, red and swollen, throwing long, crooked shadows across the town square where people had gathered in a tight ring, quiet and watchful, like scavengers waiting for the last breath. Dust crept around their boots, lifted by a dry wind that smelled of sage and something harsher, the sharp, metallic bite of iron heating too long in a forge. Lena Cross stood at the center of it, wrists bound behind her with coarse hemp rope that had already cut her skin raw. Her dark hair, once braided neat and tight, now fell in tangled waves around her face. Her plain calico dress was streaked with grime from 3 nights in the town jail. Still, it was her eyes that held the crowd. Green as pine needles in winter, steady, unflinching. "Still got that devil look in her," muttered Agnes Holt, tugging her shawl closer. "Just like her mother." The woman beside her nodded fast. "You remember Eli Talbot? 2 weeks burning with fever, then all at once, well as spring rain, right after her mother came with those herbs." Caleb Rourke stepped forward, his badge flashing dull gold in the fading light. He was tall, iron gray at the temples, with the look of a man who'd passed too many judgments to remember mercy. In his hands he carried an iron brand, the end glowing cherry red from the blacksmith's fire. "Lena Cross," his voice rang across the square, hard and final. "By the judgment of this town, you stand accused of witchcraft and dealings with dark forces. The evidence has been weighed." A short, bitter laugh slipped from Lena's mouth. Evidence. Clara Dunn breathing again after a winter everyone swore would kill her. Rose Miller's child born strong when the ledger said both mother and baby would die. Small mercies once whispered with thanks, now twisted into charges born of fear. Lena thought of her mother, Mara Cross, buried these 3 years past on the edge of town. Mara, who'd brought half of Cedar Ridge's children into the world. Mara, who'd sat through long nights cooling fevers with nothing but herb tea and steady hands. Mara, who'd never harmed a soul, and still died alone, shunned by the same people she saved. "The penalty," Rourke continued, eyes sliding away from hers, "is to be marked, so all may know what you are." Lena searched the crowd. Frank Talbot stood there, stiff. His wife turned away. Dr. Miles Keaton, silent now, though he'd once asked her mother for help. And near the back, Jonah Miller, holding the healthy child who owed her first breath to Mara's hands. "You were all there," Lena said, her voice slicing through the hush. "When the cholera came 2 summers ago, you remember who sat with your sick, who asked nothing but bread and maybe coffee in return?" Boots scraped dirt. No one answered. "My mother saved your children. She brought them into this world," Lena went on, her voice stronger. "She nursed them through sickness." "That's enough," Rourke snapped. "The decision stands." 2 men stepped out, Wade Carter and Luke Harmon, men who once tipped their hats to Mara on Sundays. Now they seized Lena's arms, forcing her down into the dust. The wooden post they shoved her against was dark with old blood, left from the last man punished there. "Hold her," Rourke ordered. Hands tore at the back of her dress, ripping fabric away, exposing pale skin. The brand hissed as Rourke lifted it from the fire. The crowd leaned in, drawn by the same dark pull that fills gallows and battlefields. Hot metal burned the air, sharp, bitter. Lena shut her eyes and thought of her mother's hands, gentle, certain. The garden behind their cabin, evenings by the fire, stories of other times when women like them were healers, not monsters. The iron touched her back. Pain exploded through her, white and blinding. Her scream ripped across the square, raw, animal. Some women turned away. The men held her fast as Rourke pressed the iron deep, slow and deliberate, burning each letter into her flesh. WITCH. When it was done, Lena sagged forward against the post, shaking, the smell of burned skin thick in the dust-filled air. The stink of scorched flesh clung to the air, mixing with dust and sage, heavy enough to choke on. Somewhere in the crowd, a child began to cry, the sound sharp and sudden. "Let this stand as a warning," Caleb Rourke declared, sliding the brand back into the forge, where it glowed like a fallen star. This is what comes of those who consort with darkness in Cedar Ridge. The people began to drift away, voices hushed, steps hurried. There were meals to prepare, children to mind, lives to return to. Judgment in their minds had been carried out. Order restored. Within moments, the square stood nearly empty, save for the sheriff and his deputies, and Lena Cross, slumped against the post, broken and shaking in the dirt. At the edge of the square, where the last buildings gave way to scrub and open land, one figure remained. He stood half-hidden in the shadow of the general store, tall and motionless, watching with eyes that missed nothing. His skin was darkened by years under an unforgiving sun. Black hair, braided with leather cord and bone, fell down his back. He wore buckskin leggings, a plain shirt, and across his shoulders lay a bow that spoke of long practice and quiet mastery. Hawk had come to Cedar Ridge to trade, pelts for ammunition, beadwork for coffee and sugar. He had heard the disturbance from his camp beyond town and come to see what kind of justice the settlers were dealing out. What he saw struck deeper than simple cruelty. He had known Mara Cross, a truth that would have stunned the people of Cedar Ridge. Years ago, wounded and burning with fever after a clash with cavalry, he had collapsed near town. She found him, hid him in a shallow cave, and tended his wounds until life returned to him. She never asked his name, never questioned the battles he'd fought. She saw only a man in need. Before she died, she had asked one thing of him. If her daughter ever stood in mortal danger, if the town turned on her as it had turned on Mara, he was to help her. A debt of honor, she called it. Hawk understood such debts. Now, as Caleb Rourke, Wade Carter, and Luke Harmon finally left the square, Hawk stepped out of the shadows. The sinking sun washed the ground in red and gold. The first stars pricked the sky. His footsteps made no sound on the packed earth. Lena's breathing was shallow, ragged. When she lifted her head, her green eyes were clouded with pain and shock. "Whew," she whispered, the word barely there. Hawk knelt beside her, slow and deliberate. Without speaking, he worked the rope from her wrists, his fingers careful despite their strength. When she was free, he helped her sit, supporting her as her burned back screamed in protest. "Your mother," he said quietly, his English marked but clear, "was a good woman. She would not want you to die here in the dirt." Lena stared at him, trying to focus. "You knew my mother?" "I knew her." He rose and offered his hand. "And she would want you to live. Will you come with me?" For a long moment, Lena only looked at his outstretched hand. He was a stranger, an Apache warrior stepping from the dusk like something half-real, but the town had marked her, burned her like livestock. There was nothing left for her here but a slow, lonely death. She placed her trembling hand in his. Hawk pulled her to her feet. Together, they left Cedar Ridge behind. Away from the square, away from the brand, toward whatever waited in the wide, merciless frontier. Behind them, windows glowed warm with lamplight as families gathered at their tables. No one turned to watch the two figures vanish into the dark. The brand on Lena's back would heal in time. The scar would not. It would remain, a line drawn between the life she had lost and the one she could not yet imagine. The desert night closed around them, cool and alive with unfamiliar sounds. A coyote cried somewhere far off, its call echoing against unseen canyon walls. Hawk moved through the scrub with the ease of someone born to it, steps sure even beneath starlight. Lena stumbled after him, her torn dress catching on mesquite thorns, soft town shoes slipping on loose stone. Each step sent fresh fire across her back. More than once, she bit her lip to keep from crying out. She followed because the alternative was unthinkable. "How far?" she whispered at last. "Not far now," Hawk answered, though concern flickered in his eyes. They had walked what felt like hours when he led her onto a narrow trail threading between two towering red rock walls. The path was steep, nearly invisible unless you knew where to look. Lena's legs shook with exhaustion, and twice Hawk had to steady her as gravel slid beneath her feet. They finally reached a narrow shelf of land tucked deep among the rocks. A spring seeped out from the stone, gathering into a clear pool that caught the stars like scattered coins. Pines clung to the edges of the plateau, their branches forming a natural screen. Here, the air smelled of clean water and resin, not dust or fear. "Here," Hawk said, motioning toward a shallow hollow worn into the rock by wind and time. "You'll be safe." Safe. The word felt strange in Lena Cross's mouth. She couldn't recall the last time it had meant anything real. Perhaps not since Mara Cross died 3 years ago, before the whispers started and people began turning away when Lena passed. Hawk moved with quiet purpose, gathering dry wood and striking a small fire near the cave's mouth. Flames licked the stone walls, casting restless shadows, and the warmth felt like mercy after the desert night. From a leather pouch, he took out strips of dried meat and a small handful of pine nuts. "Eat," he said gently, offering them to her. Lena took the food, suddenly aware she hadn't eaten since the morning of the trial. The meat was tough and salty, but it tasted better than anything she could remember. As she chewed, she watched him in the firelight. Hawk looked to be around 30, lean and weathered from long miles and harder living. His hands were rough from bow and blade, yet they had been careful when he steadied her on the climb. There was a calm strength about him, measured, controlled, that reminded her, unexpectedly, of her mother. "Why?" she asked, the question bursting free at last. He glanced up from adjusting her torn dress over her shoulders. "Why what? Why help me? You don't know me. For all you know, they were right. Maybe I am what they say." A faint smile touched his mouth. "Are you?" The question left her unsteady. No one in Cedar Ridge had ever asked what she truly was. They had decided for her, driven by fear and the need to blame someone. "I don't know," she admitted quietly. "Sometimes I know things. I knew Clara Dunn would survive her sickness. I knew Rose Miller's baby would be born strong when everyone else was preparing for death. My mother healed with herbs and care. I think some of that passed to me." Hawk nodded, as if it answered everything. "Your mother was wise in the old ways. That is not evil. But many fear what they don't understand. You really knew her. She saved my life." He stirred the fire, sending sparks spiraling upward. "Years ago, near the Mexican border, Iron Spur troopers left me for dead, shot and burning with fever. Your mother found me and brought me to a place like this. She healed me, never asked who I was or what side I fought on. She saw only a wounded man. Tears stung Lena's eyes, the first since the branding. That sounds like her. She spoke of you, Hawk went on, worried about what would happen if the town turned on you the way it had turned on others. Others? Lena asked. His face darkened. Your mother was not the first called witch. There was a woman who could speak to horses. They killed her. A healer from the south who eased childbirth. They drove her into the desert to die. Fear makes men cruel. Ignorance makes them dangerous. The fire cracked softly between them. Lena drew her knees up, flinching as pain flared across her burned back. What am I supposed to do now? She asked. I can't go back. Even if they let me live, I'll always be marked, always the witch they branded. Perhaps, Hawk said quietly. Or perhaps you will become something more. Before she could ask what he meant, exhaustion overtook her. The day's horror, the long walk, the pain, everything crashed down at once. Her eyelids grew heavy. Despite fighting it, sleep pulled her under. The last thing she felt was Hawk settling at the cave's entrance, his blanket placed over her shoulders, his rifle resting across his knees. And in that fading moment, Lena knew something she hadn't felt in years. That someone was watching over her, and meant her no harm. When she woke, the sun stood high above the rocks, bright and unforgiving, and Hawk was nowhere in sight. Panic surged through Lena Cross. Had he left her here, alone in this wilderness? Had she been abandoned to bleed and weaken among the stones? Then she noticed the gourd of fresh water set beside her head, the neatly stacked firewood, a small collection of roots and berries laid within reach. She let out a slow breath and eased herself upright. Her back was stiff and burning, but the pain was manageable. The spring water tasted cool and clean, nothing like the muddy draw from Cedar Ridge's well. As she drank, footsteps sounded along the trail below. She tensed until Hawk's familiar shape appeared at the edge of the plateau. He carried a pair of rabbits and several long, slender plants she didn't recognize. You're awake, he said, settling near the fire. How do you feel? Like I was branded with a hot iron, Lena replied dryly, then instantly regretted the bitterness of it. Hawk didn't take offense. If anything, his respect for her seemed to deepen. Good, he said calmly. Pain reminds us we're still alive. He set to work with practiced ease, and Lena found herself watching his hands again. They were strong, hands that could be violent if needed. She had no doubt of that. Yet there was a gentleness in the way he moved, a quiet reverence even as he handled the dead rabbits, as if their taking carried meaning. Where did you learn English? She asked, more to break the silence than from real curiosity. Mission school, he said without looking up. When I was young, the fathers thought they could make me a proper Christian. They were only half successful. Which half? She asked. He glanced up, a flicker of humor in his dark eyes. I can read their holy book and speak their tongue, but I still believe spirits live in all things, and I think their God is too small for a country this wide. Despite everything, Lena almost smiled. My mother used to say something like that. She said God was bigger than any church could hold. Wise woman, Hawk said. He set the rabbits over the fire. Tell me about her, about your life before yesterday. Lena hesitated, then began. She spoke of the small cabin at the edge of town, of helping Mara Cross tend the sick and wounded, of the garden where they grew healing plants, plants that later became proof of supposed evil. She talked about her mother's death, the loneliness that followed, the slow change in the way the Cedar Ridge folk looked at her. Hawk listened without interrupting, asking only the occasional quiet question that helped her continue. There was something steady in his presence, patient, unjudging, that made her want to keep going. It had been years since anyone truly listened to her, as if her words mattered. "She made me promise something," Hawk said at last, when Lena fell silent. "Your mother did, when the sickness was taking her. She made me swear that if you were ever in mortal danger, I would help you." Lena stared into the fire. "She said you would need someone who understood how to walk between two worlds," he continued. "The world of the town and the world of the wild. The world of people and the world of spirits. She said one day you would have to choose where you belong." "And if I can't?" Lena asked softly. "If I don't belong in either?" Hawk was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was gentle but certain. "Then maybe you'll help make a new one." The rabbit was tender and rich, flavored with herbs he'd gathered from the desert. As they ate, Hawk showed her the plants he'd collected. What eased pain, what stopped infection, what would help her burned skin heal clean. His knowledge was deep and practical, passed down through generations who had survived this land by watching and remembering. "Your mother knew some of this," he said, crushing dried leaves between his fingers, releasing their scent into the air. "There is more," Hawk said quietly, his voice steady. "Much more, if you are willing to learn." "Learn what?" "How to live in this land. How to read the signs it leaves for those who pay attention. How to find water, food, shelter. How to defend yourself when there is no other choice." His gaze held hers across the fire. "How to become more than what Cedar Ridge tried to turn you into." The sun was sliding toward the western rim of the world, streaking the sky with gold and deep crimson. Far off, a hawk cried as it circled on the desert air. Lena Cross looked out over the vast country below their refuge, endless red stone and sage rolling toward purple mountains. It was beautiful, merciless, and utterly unlike anything she had known. Yet for the first time since Mara Cross died, something stirred in her chest that felt dangerously close to hope. "Yes," she said softly, "I want to learn." The days that followed blurred together. Pain, healing, and slow awakening. Lena began measuring time, not by the bell of Cedar Ridge's church, but by shadows sliding across canyon walls and the steady return of strength to her body. Hawk built a shelter deep within the cave, pine boughs and hides layered together, the air rich with smoke and wild herbs he gathered each morning. For a week, Lena lay on her stomach while Hawk tended the wound on her back, with a patience that astonished her. "The skin must breathe," he explained on the third morning, carefully washing away the salve from the night before. His touch was precise and impersonal, yet gentler than any doctor's hands she remembered. "If we bind it tight, hide it away, it will rot and poison you from inside." She clenched her teeth as he applied fresh medicine, a paste of willow bark, sage, and something unfamiliar. The sting faded into a cool numbness that dulled the constant ache. "My mother never taught me about burns," Lena said, her voice muffled against the blanket. "Cuts and fevers, broken bones, but nothing like this." "Your mother learned the ways of her people," Hawk replied, hands steady. "This knowledge comes from mine. Different plants, different methods, same truth. The body knows how to heal if we help it." As the days passed, Lena watched him with growing curiosity. He rose before dawn, vanished into the desert for hours, and always returned with something, meat, medicine, or news from beyond their hiding place. "An Iron Spur Troopers patrol passed through Cedar Ridge yesterday," he said on the 5th day, setting down a brace of quail. "3 companies heading south. They asked about you." Fear tightened her stomach. "What did they ask?" Whether anyone had seen you. Whether you had family who might take you in. He paused. Caleb Rourke told them you were probably dead, said the desert would finish what they started. Maybe he's right, Lena said quietly. Maybe the person I was is gone. Hawk studied her for a long moment. That depends on who you decide to become. By the 7th day, she could sit up without the wound screaming in protest. Hawk gave her one of his spare shirts, soft buckskin against her skin. She wore it loose, the scent of smoke and sage clinging to it, and felt an unexpected comfort. Tell me about her, Hawk said that night as they ate roasted roots and pine nut cakes. Your mother. Who was she, really? Lena stared into the fire. Strong, she said at last. Stronger than anyone knew. She could sit all night with a fevered child and never show how tired she was. She lost patience, no matter what the town says, and still rose the next morning ready to help the next person. She swallowed hard. But she was lonely. After Papa died, the town respected her skill, but they never trusted her. There was always something that set her apart. What kind of something? Hawk asked. She knew things, Lena said slowly, voicing what she never had before. Not just medicine. People. What was coming. She knew when Clara Dunn's husband would leave months before he did. She knew Rose Miller's baby would be born breech before anyone could tell. Hawk nodded, unsurprised. Sight runs in bloodlines sometimes. Like eye color. Like hands. Do you think, Lena hesitated, then forced herself on, do you think that's what I have? Whatever makes me different? I think, Hawk said carefully, you have gifts your mother tried to teach you to hide, and hiding them did not make them disappear. And hiding them had never kept her safe. That night, Lena Cross dreamed of her mother for the first time since the trial. In the dream, Mara Cross sat beside her bed, just as she had when Lena was small, her presence warm and steady. Gentle fingers brushed through Lena's hair. The scars we carry on the outside, her mother said, her voice clear and close, are nothing compared to the ones we carry inside. But both can heal, my darling. And both can become strength instead of shame. Lena woke with tears on her cheeks to find Hawk crouched beside her, concern etched into his face. Bad dream? He asked softly. No, Lena said, surprised by her own certainty. A good one, I think. On the 10th day, she finally asked to see the wound. Hawk hesitated, warning her it was still raw, that it might be hard to look at. But Lena insisted. Using a piece of polished metal as a mirror, she twisted carefully until her back came into view. The brand had healed into raised, angry red letters. In time, they would pale, but they would never vanish. Witch, burned into her flesh, a permanent verdict from Cedar Ridge. For a moment, despair surged up, threatening to pull her under. Then Hawk spoke, his voice calm and certain. Among my people, warriors wear their scars with pride. Each mark tells a story, of survival, of strength, of standing in danger and living through it. Lena set the mirror down and faced him. This isn't a battle scar, it's shame. Is it? Hawk sat across from her, eyes steady. You stood before an entire town. You endured pain without pleading or breaking. You survived something meant to destroy you. How is that not the mark of a warrior? Something shifted inside her, a small crack in the wall of self-loathing she'd built around her heart. I never thought of it that way. The people who did this want you to carry their shame, Hawk continued. They want you to believe their story about who you are, but you can choose another. What story? Lena asked. The story of a woman who walked through fire and came out alive. Of someone who refused to die when giving up would have been easier. His voice softened. The story of a healer punished for healing, who kept her gift alive no matter how hard they tried to break her. That afternoon, Hawk began teaching her the names of the plants he gathered. He showed her how to prepare the medicines he'd been using, guiding her hands as she ground dried leaves, correcting her grip as she stripped bark from the right kind of willow. "Your mother knew some of this," he said, "but she learned from books, from trial and error. This knowledge comes from my people, passed from grandmother to granddaughter, healer to apprentice." "Why are you sharing it with me?" Lena asked. Hawk was quiet for a moment. "Because your mother saved my life, and knowledge is the most valuable gift I can give in return." He paused. "And because I believe you will need it." "Need it for what?" He shook his head. "Some things are meant to be discovered, not explained." That evening, as the sun sank and painted the canyon walls in gold and crimson, Lena realized she could move without constant pain for the first time in days. She walked to the edge of the plateau and gazed out over the desert, something unnamed stirring in her chest. Behind her, Hawk worked quietly at the fire, preparing their meal, humming a low, wordless tune that followed the rhythm of the wind through the stone. It felt peaceful in a way the hymns of Cedar Ridge never had. "Hawk," Lena said suddenly, turning toward him. "Yes?" "Thank you," she said, "not just for saving me, for helping me see myself differently." He looked up, his expression gentle. "You're seeing yourself clearly for the first time. That doesn't require thanks." As they ate beneath the stars, Lena found herself thinking about the future without fear. For the first time, she wasn't defined by what others demanded she be. The brand on her back would never disappear. But maybe Hawk was right. Maybe it wasn't only a mark of shame. Maybe it was proof that she had survived the worst that fear and ignorance could inflict, and was still here, still breathing, still capable of becoming more than Cedar Ridge had ever allowed. The scar would remain, and as Lena watched the firelight dance along the canyon walls, she thought that perhaps this, too, was as it should be. The realization took root on a morning when the desert bloomed beneath an unexpected rain. Lena Cross woke to the sound of rain hammering the canyon walls and the deep, rich smell of wet earth, a scent she had almost forgotten after so many weeks in dry country. Hawk stood at the mouth of the cave, watching the storm with an expression she had never seen on him before. It was something caught between joy and grief, as if the rain stirred memories both treasured and painful. "The spirits are washing the world clean," he said without turning. "My grandmother used to say rain like this carries messages from those who've crossed to the other side." Lena joined him at the entrance, stunned by how the land had changed overnight. What was usually bare and harsh now bloomed with sudden color. Desert flowers bursting into reds and yellows, the air itself alive and shimmering. "Do you think she's trying to tell us something?" Lena asked. "Maybe," Hawk said, glancing at her, then back to the rain. "Or maybe it's time you knew the truth about why your mother really came to Cedar Ridge." Something in his voice tightened Lena's chest. "What do you mean?" Hawk turned from the storm and sat beside the fire, motioning for her to sit across from him. For a long moment, he stared into the flames, as if steadying himself. "Your mother wasn't born in Missouri," he said at last. "Not the way she told the people of Cedar Ridge." Lena felt the ground shift beneath her. "She was born here, in this desert. Her mother walked between Apache and Mexican worlds. Her name wasn't Mara Cross then. It was Maria Luce, and she carried the gifts of both her peoples in her blood." "That's impossible," Lena said, her voice barely holding. "She would have told me. She would have. When telling you the truth might have gotten you both killed." Hawk's eyes were gentle, but he didn't look away. "Cedar Ridge barely tolerated a white woman who knew too much about healing. They would never have accepted one with Apache blood." The rain kept falling, but Lena no longer heard it. Her thoughts spun, trying to reconcile this with everything she believed about her life. But my father, Ethan Cross, he was a good man. He was, Hawk said, a trader who traveled these lands before they were so tightly claimed. He met your mother when she was working as a healer for a Mexican family near Tucson. He loved her for exactly who she was, never asked her to hide. Lena's hands shook as she lifted her cup of pine needle tea. Then why Cedar Ridge? Why live a lie? Because your mother was pregnant with you, and the world was turning dangerous, Hawk replied. The army was pushing deeper into Apache land. Mexican families were being driven out. Women with knowledge, women with gifts, were being called witches and worse. He paused. Your parents thought if they vanished into a small town, lived quietly, your mother could help people without drawing attention. But it didn't work. It worked for a time, Hawk said softly. Long enough for you to grow up safe. But gifts like hers, like yours, don't stay hidden forever, and people fear what they don't understand. Lena set the cup down, her hands unsteady. You're saying I'm... What? I'm saying you carry the blood of healers and seers, Hawk answered, of women who read the wind and water, who listened to spirits. The Cedar Ridge folk sensed it, even if they couldn't name it, and it terrified them. The realization hit her in waves. The sideways looks, the whispers that stopped when she passed, the things she'd known without knowing how. The moments when I can tell someone's about to fall sick, Lena said slowly. The dreams that come true. Your inheritance, Hawk said. Your mother tried to teach you to bury it because she knew what happened to women who didn't. But blood always speaks. Lena stood and walked to the cave mouth, staring out at the rain-soaked desert. The storm was breaking now, leaving the land gleaming with moisture and new life. Why tell me this now? Because others know the truth of your bloodline, Hawk said, joining her, and they've been looking for you. A chill ran through her. Who? There's a man, Hawk said grimly. Colonel Silas Vane. He commands the Iron Spur Troopers. He deals in unusual matters along the frontier. Deals how? He collects women like you, Hawk said. Women with gifts. Some go willingly, others don't. Some say he believes those abilities can be turned into weapons. Others whisper he thinks their blood itself holds power. Lena felt sick. He knows about me? He knows about your mother's line. He's tracked families like yours for years. Your mother's arrival in Cedar Ridge, her reputation, your birth. All of it would have drawn his eye. How do you know this? Lena asked. Hawk didn't answer right away. His jaw tightened. Because my sister, he said quietly, was one of the women who disappeared. The words struck Lena like a blow to the chest. She turned toward him and, for the first time, truly saw the depth of pain Hawk carried beneath his steady calm. I'm so sorry, she said softly. My sister's name was Ember, Hawk replied. She could speak with animals. She could heal with a single touch. His jaw tightened. 2 winters ago, Colonel Silas Vane's men came to our camp. They said they needed her help with wounded soldiers. She went willingly, believing she was answering a call to heal. He swallowed. We never saw her again. The weight of it made Lena's head spin. Is that why you were in Cedar Ridge? She asked. Were you looking for her? I was following rumors, Hawk said, tracking Vane's movements. When I heard about your trial, I thought it might be another of his traps, forcing women with gifts to reveal themselves by pushing them to help. His eyes locked with hers. But when I saw you standing in that square, facing that crowd without breaking, I knew you were real. And when I recognized your mother's features in your face, I suspected the truth. When you told me how Mara Cross once saved an injured Apache warrior, I was certain. Your mother saved my life. That bond doesn't end with her. Lena leaned back against the cave wall, dizzy with everything she was hearing. Her past, her family, her place in the world. Everything had shifted. "What does this mean for me?" she asked at last. "What am I supposed to do now?" "That depends on who you choose to become," Hawk said. "You can hide. You can bury your gifts like your mother did and hope Vane never finds you. Or you can claim what you are." His voice sharpened. "You can learn to use your abilities fully, become strong enough to protect yourself and others." "Others?" Lena asked. "There are many," Hawk said. "Women and men with gifts like yours. They live afraid, hiding, dying alone when they could be living with purpose." "You're talking about fighting back." "I'm talking about survival," he answered. "Not just yours, but for everyone who carries the old blood and the old knowledge." He gestured towards the rain-washed desert. "This land is changing. The old ways are being erased. Soon there will be nowhere left to hide." Lena closed her eyes, feeling the weight of it settle on her shoulders. When she opened them, Hawk was watching her with cautious hope. "If I choose this path," she said slowly, "if I stop hiding and truly learn, what would that mean?" "It would mean leaving this place," Hawk said, "traveling to where the old knowledge still survives. It would mean danger you can't yet imagine. It would mean accepting that a normal life in towns and settlements may never be yours." "And Colonel Silas Vane?" "He'll come for you sooner or later," Hawk said. "Better to meet him from a place of strength than fear." Lena looked out at the desert as the last storm clouds broke apart, revealing a hard, brilliant blue sky. The rain had awakened life in the land. Maybe it could do the same for her. "There's more," Hawk said quietly. "Something I felt the first time I treated your wounds." "What?" "Your gifts are stronger than your mother's ever were," he said carefully. "With proper guidance, you could become something rare, a bridge between the old ways and the new, a protector for those who have none." Something stirred in Lena's chest. Not fear this time, but recognition. "Where would we go?" she asked. "If I choose this?" "South," Hawk said. "Deep desert. There are still people there who remember what it means to walk between worlds." His voice carried both promise and danger. "It won't be easy. There are no guarantees. But you would learn who you truly are and what you might become." The rain had fully passed, leaving the air scented with sage and new beginnings. Lena stood at the cave entrance, warm sun on her face, cool wind at her back, and made her choice. "When do we leave?" They departed 3 days later, at dawn, when the desert air was cool and the eastern mountains glowed rose and gold. Lena had spent those days learning to move like Hawk, quiet, efficient, leaving little trace. Her back had healed enough to carry a pack, though Hawk insisted on bearing most of the load. "Where we're going," he told her as he showed her how to bundle her few belongings. "We can't afford excess. Take only what you cannot live without." In the end, Lena carried very little. Her mother's silver locket, a small knife Hawk had given her, and a handful of precious seeds from the medicinal plants they had gathered together. Everything else, the life she'd known in Cedar Ridge, the woman she'd been before the brand, she left behind in the cave, like a skin shed, and never reclaimed. The first days of travel carried them south into land that grew harsher and more broken with every mile. They followed old game trails that twisted between towering red stone walls and dropped into hidden basins, where clear springs rose from deep beneath the earth. Hawk moved with an easy, flowing confidence, as if the ground itself guided his steps, reading signs in sand and stone that Lena Cross would have sworn did not exist. "See how the grass thickens here?" he said during one brief rest, pointing to a stretch of ground that looked no different from the rest. "Water runs beneath the surface. And those scratches on the rock. Mountain lion." He marked this place less than 2 days ago. Lena leaned closer, forcing her eyes to slow, to search. How can you tell it was 2 days? The depth of the marks, the way the stone dust has settled. Fresh scratches stay pale. Older ones get worn smooth by the wind. Hawk shifted his pack onto his shoulders again. Your mother knew pieces of this, learned what she could from books and need. This knowledge comes from generations who survived by listening to the land. As they walked, he taught her more. How to judge direction by the sun's arc and the night stars. How to recognize plants that fed and plants that killed. How to place her feet so sound carried away instead of ahead. Each lesson stacked upon the last, forming something inside her that felt unfamiliar and yet deeply remembered. There, Hawk said late on the second afternoon, pointing to what seemed like bare rock and brush. Where does that trail go? Lena squinted. At first she saw nothing. Then patterns began to surface. Stones nudged aside, vegetation worn thin by repeated passage. Up toward that ridge, she said slowly. A faint smile crossed his face. Good. Your eyes are learning. That trail leads to water and shelter, and danger. What kind? She asked. She studied the signs again. The path was narrow, too tight for wagons. The plants nearby showed signs of heavy grazing. The trees were scarred and dark. Something comes to drink there, she said. A bear, most likely. The claw marks are too high for a mountain lion. Hawk nodded toward a lightning-split pine she had barely noticed. We take the long way. The detour cost them hours, but it gave Hawk time to show her how predators moved, where to step, when to wait. By the time they made camp, Lena's head ached with new information, yet her senses felt sharper than they ever had. As they ate dried meat and wild onions beside a carefully hidden fire, she shook her head. I never realized how much I wasn't seeing. In Cedar Ridge, I thought I knew the land. I was blind. Townfolk see only what keeps life moving, Hawk said quietly. Out here, not seeing gets you killed. Your senses are waking because they have to. That night, wrapped in her blanket beneath a sky blazing with stars brighter than any she'd known, Lena felt something shift. The fear that had followed her since the trial was loosening its grip, replaced by a growing trust in her own strength. Her body felt stronger each day, her thoughts clearer. She was beginning to understand what Hawk meant about becoming more. On the third day, the land changed again. Older, wilder. Cliff dwellings clung to sheer rock faces, their empty openings watching the travelers like hollow eyes. Symbols spiraled across the stone, animals, people, signs that seemed to move as the light changed. My people didn't make these, Hawk said when Lena asked. They were here before us, but we learned to read some of them. He showed her markings that pointed to water, warned of danger, or marked places where the land demanded respect. As they moved deeper into that ancient country, Lena felt a pull she could not explain, as if the ground itself recognized her. Do you feel it? Hawk asked, watching her study a complex carving. Yes, she said, surprised by her certainty. Like remembering something I didn't know I'd lost. The blood remembers what the mind forgets, he said softly. Your mother's people walked these canyons. Their spirits still linger. That afternoon, signs of recent travelers appeared. Fresh footprints in dry washes, the remains of well-built fires, horse tracks laid by riders who knew how to move unseen. Hawk's posture tightened, his hand drifting closer to the knife at his belt. Friends of yours? Lena asked. Maybe, he said. Or not. We must be careful. He crouched over the tracks. Unshod ponies, skilled riders, could be Apache, could be Mexican bandits, could be something else. From then on, they moved with caution, favoring stone over sand to hide their passage, skirting open ground where distant eyes might find them. Hawk taught Lena simple hand signals and showed her how to become utterly still at the first hint of danger. The lesson proved its worth late that afternoon, when voices drifted toward them on the wind. Hawk raised his hand in warning and guided her behind a cluster of broken boulders. They crouched, barely breathing. As the riders drew closer, Lena caught fragments of the conversation. 3 men, at least, speaking in rough blends of Spanish and English. "The tracks run this way, but they're old. The colonel wants them stopped before they reach the sacred ground. Take the woman alive! The Apache!" The voices faded as the horses moved on, but the words lingered like ice in her veins. Hawk's face was set when he turned to her. "They're closer than I hoped." "How did they find us?" she whispered. "They haven't," he said. "They know where we're heading and they're trying to cut us off." He lifted his pack in one smooth motion. "We move faster now, and quieter. The places I told you about, we're almost there. This last stretch is the most dangerous." They traveled through dusk and into the night, guided by moonlight across ground that would have been impassable in darkness. Lena drew on strength she didn't know she possessed, matching Hawk's pace even as her legs trembled and her lungs burned in the thin air. At dawn, they reached the place he had promised. The entrance was a narrow slot canyon, barely wide enough for one person, its walls rising so high they swallowed the sky. When they passed through and emerged on the other side, Lena stopped short. The valley beyond felt untouched by time. Ancient cottonwoods lined a clear stream that spilled down from the cliffs. Stone dwellings stood nestled into the rock, not crude shelters but carefully shaped homes that seemed grown from the land itself. "This is where your journey truly begins," Hawk said, his voice carrying a reverence she had never heard before. "This is where you learn what it means to walk between worlds." Smoke curled from several roofs. People moved through their morning routines. Women grinding corn, men shaping tools, children laughing in the water. They looked up as Lena and Hawk approached, curious but unafraid. "They were expecting us," Hawk said. "News travels fast in the deep desert. And some here knew your mother well." As Lena stepped deeper into the village, she felt the last threads of her old self slip away. Whatever lay ahead, she would never again be the terrified woman branded in the dust of Cedar Ridge. The first to greet them was an elderly woman whose silver-white hair shone in the morning light. She walked with unhurried grace, as if time itself had learned patience from her. Her face was lined by years, but her dark eyes were sharp and alive. When they settled on Lena, the woman smiled. "So," she said, her voice musical, shaped by many tongues, "you are Mara Cross's daughter. I see her in the way you hold yourself, in your jaw, when you are unsure but refuse to yield." Heat rushed to Lena's cheeks. "You knew my mother?" "I brought you into this world," the woman said gently. "Here, in this valley, during the worst snowstorm any of us could remember, your mother labored for 2 days. When you came, you were silent as death. We feared we had lost you." The truth struck Lena like a blow. "I was born here." The woman nodded, pointing to a dwelling built into the cliff face, its walls painted with symbols that shimmered in the light. "Your first breath was drawn in that house. Your mother named you Ash, one who walks between fire and shadow. She knew you would need another name beyond this valley." Hawk rested a steady hand on Lena's shoulder. "This is Elder Dawn. She keeps the memories of this place, and she is the wisest healer in the southern lands." Elder Dawn studied Lena as if reading a map written beneath her skin. "You carry the mark they gave you differently now," she said softly. "Good." Without thinking, Lena's hand went to her back. "How did you know?" I see it in your spirit, Elder Dawn replied. You wear your pain like armor now, not like chains. Her smile was gentle, knowing. Shame poisons more surely than any venom. You have learned that. Lena stood there, the morning light on her face, understanding that her path had truly begun. That was the first lesson of power, to turn what was meant to break you into the source of your strength. Over the next hour, Elder Dawn guided them through the village, introducing Lena to the people who had chosen this hidden valley as their refuge. There was Miguel Reyes, once a vaquero whose rare gift for speaking with horses had made him indispensable until it made him dangerous. There was Sky, a woman of mixed blood who could find water where the desert seemed dead, forced to flee north from Mexico when authorities decided her abilities were too valuable to remain free. And Rowan, whose mastery of medicinal plants rivaled any formally trained doctor, yet whose Cherokee heritage barred him from most settlements. With each introduction, another piece fell into place, forming a picture Lena was only beginning to see. This was more than a hidden village. It was a sanctuary for those whose gifts set them apart from the ordinary world. A place where abilities that invited fear elsewhere were honored and protected. We are what remains, Elder Dawn said that evening, as they sat by the stream, sharing corn cakes and roasted rabbit. The survivors of something far older than territories and missions, older than cavalry and railroads. Our blood remembers a time when the boundary between worlds was thin, when speaking with spirits was no stranger than speaking with neighbors. But why here? Lena asked, motioning toward the valley walls. Why this place? Because here the veils are thinnest, Elder Dawn replied. Here, the line between what men call real and what they call impossible dissolves. Your mother brought you here to be born because she knew you would need that bond, an anchor to deeper truths. From across the fire, Sky leaned forward. Show her the pool. Let her see. Elder Dawn studied Lena carefully. Are you ready, child, to see yourself as the spirits see you? Lena swallowed, her throat dry, and nodded. Elder Dawn led her away from the fire to a natural basin, carved smooth by centuries of flowing water. The pool was perfectly round, its surface so still it reflected the stars like scattered diamonds. Kneel, Elder Dawn instructed. Look into the water, not with your ordinary eyes, but with the sight that comes from deeper places. Lena knelt on the cool stone. At first she saw only herself, weathered by travel, skin darkened by the sun, her hair longer and wilder than it had ever been in Cedar Ridge. Then the surface trembled, though no wind touched it. Her reflection sharpened, as if she were seeing herself for the first time without distortion. Shapes gathered around her image. She saw her mother, not as she had known her, but as Mara Cross once was, dressed in buckskin and silver, hair braided with feathers and turquoise, her hands glowing softly as she healed the wounded. Behind her stood other women, generations upon generations, their hands linked through time. Your grandmother, Elder Dawn's voice drifted as if from far away, and hers before her, all the mothers who carried the sight and the healing touch back to the dawn of memory. The vision shifted. Lena saw moments from lives she had never lived yet, somehow remembered. A woman standing in a desert storm, calling lightning to defend her people. Another walking through a village ravaged by plague, her touch restoring what medicine could not. A young girl no older than Lana herself, facing armed soldiers with nothing but the power of her voice and unshakable purpose. This is your inheritance, Elder Dawn said. Not only the blood of healers, but the legacy of those who stood between darkness and light, who protected the innocent when no one else would, or could. Lena's reflection changed again. The scars on her back shone through her clothing, no longer raw and angry, but glowing with a soft, silver light, as if written by stars rather than iron. Her eyes, once ordinary green, now seemed to hold depths vast as the night sky. "I don't understand," Lena whispered, unable to look away. "Understanding will come," Elder Dawn replied gently. "For now, it is enough to see, to know that what you carry is not a curse, but a gift passed down through women who refused to be broken by fear." The vision faded, leaving Lena gazing at her familiar reflection. It was the same face, yet steadier, surer, marked by an awareness that had not been there before. "The ceremony will take place tomorrow night," Elder Dawn announced as they returned to the fire. "When the moon is dark and the veils are thinnest, you will undergo the ritual of true naming. When you emerge, you will no longer stand between identities. You will know who you are meant to be." That night, Lena lay on soft furs in the house where she had been born, staring up at stars visible through an opening in the roof. Hawk slept elsewhere, though she could hear voices murmuring around the central fire as the villagers spoke late into the night. Sleep came in fragments, filled with dreams that felt like memories, or glimpses of what was still to come. She saw herself standing on a high mesa, arms lifted toward a sky heavy with thunder. She saw Colonel Silas Vane's soldiers pressing toward the hidden valley, and herself waiting at the narrow pass like judgment given human form. She saw Hawk's face, lined by years she had not yet lived, his eyes holding pride, worry, and something deeper than gratitude, a bond forged beyond words. When she woke, the sun was already high. The village was alive with preparation for the night ahead. Women braided garlands from desert blossoms. Men carved protective symbols into smooth stone. Children moved back and forth from the sacred spring, filling gourds with clear water that rose from the valley's heart. "Nervous?" Hawk asked, finding her seated beside the stream as the afternoon wore on. "Terrified," Lena admitted. "What if I'm not who they think I am? What if I fail them?" He sat beside her, his presence steady, grounding, just as it had been since that first night in the canyon. "You can't fail them by being who you truly are," he said quietly. "And you can't be anything else, no matter how hard you try." She studied him. "Is that what you told yourself when you came here?" Hawk was silent for a moment. "I wasn't invited the way you were. I arrived broken, running from the cavalry after my sister was taken. Elder Dawn and the others took me in because they recognized someone shaped by the same violence that scattered their own people." "Do you ever regret it?" she asked. "Leaving your old life behind?" He met her gaze, eyes dark and certain. "How could I regret finding a place where I'm valued instead of feared? The real question is whether you'd regret not choosing this." As the sun slipped low and the first stars pierced the dusk, Elder Dawn came for Lena. She was dressed in garments unlike anything she had known. A deerskin dress stitched with beadwork that traced her maternal line, and a cloak that caught the light like woven moonbeams. "Are you ready, Ash?" Elder Dawn asked, using the name that still felt new on Lena's tongue. Lena drew a slow breath. She thought of Mara Cross, of the road that had led her here, of the woman she had been, and the one she was becoming. "Yes," she said, and for the first time, the word held no doubt. The ceremony carried them through the night, stretching toward dawn. Visions and memories flooded Lena, some ancient, some yet to come. When she stepped from the ritual circle, she carried her name fully claimed. Ash, the one who walks between fire and shadow. Power hummed beneath her skin, like lightning bound within flesh. The celebration shattered with the arrival of Miguel Reyes, who rode hard into the valley on a lathered horse, urgency etched into his face. "Soldiers," he gasped, sliding from the saddle. "3 companies, maybe more. They're coming up the southern approach, and they've brought turned scouts." Men who knew these canyons. Elder Dawn did not flinch, but steel straightened her spine. "How long?" "Half a day. Less. They're moving fast, and they know exactly where they're headed." Miguel's eyes found Lena. "They're asking about a woman with a branded back, offering gold for answers." Colonel Silas Vane had found them. The valley moved with practiced urgency. Elders and children were guided into deep cliff caves. Those able to fight took positions along the narrow entrance. But Elder Dawn turned to Lena with unwavering resolve. "You will not hide," she declared. "This is why you were brought here, why you were named. Your test has come." "I don't understand," Lena protested, even as Skye and Rowan began painting glowing symbols along her arms and face. "I'm not a warrior. I've never carried a weapon." "There are many kinds of warfare," Elder Dawn replied. "And many kinds of weapons. You carry truth. Used at the right moment, it can cut deeper than steel." Hawk stepped to her side, bow across his shoulder, rifle in hand. "I'll stand with you." "No," Lena said. Surprised by her own certainty, she touched his hand. "If this is my fight, I face it. Stay close enough to catch me if I fall." By midday, hoofbeats thundered against the canyon walls. The defenders were in place. Lena stood alone at the valley's mouth, wearing the ceremonial dress that marked her for what she was. Daughter of old blood, keeper of the forgotten ways. Colonel Silas Vane rode at the head of the column, a tall man with iron-gray hair and eyes cold as winter sky. His uniform was pristine despite the desert miles, his posture that of a man used to obedience without question. Behind him followed 24 iron spur troopers and several turned scouts. He reined in his horse 20 feet from where Lena stood, alone and unarmed, and the desert fell silent around them. His pale eyes swept over every detail, her ceremonial dress, the glowing symbols painted across her skin, the way she stood unarmed and unbowed, though she was outnumbered 30-1. "Miss Cross, I presume?" he said at last, his tone cultured, precise. "Though I hear you've taken a new name. Ash, is it? How primitive." "My name is mine to choose," Lena Cross replied. Her voice carried farther than it should have in the thin mountain air. "Just like my fate." Colonel Silas Vane smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "I'm afraid that's where you're mistaken, my dear. Your fate became my concern the moment you demonstrated abilities that could serve the greater good of this territory." "The moment I became useful to you?" Lena said evenly. "Useful, yes, and dangerous if left unchecked." Vane gestured toward the hidden valley behind her. "This gathering of misfits and savages you've found, or been absorbed by, poses a threat to the order we're trying to build out here. People like you make common folk nervous. Nervous people do unpredictable things." Something stirred in Lena's chest, a spreading heat that had nothing to do with the desert sun. "So you collect us," she said, "like specimens. You turn our gifts into tools." "I ensure such abilities serve civilization rather than chaos," Vane replied mildly, as if discussing the weather. "You may come with me voluntarily, Miss Cross, and enjoy comfortable quarters where your talents can be studied and directed, or you may force my hand." "And the others?" Lena asked. "The people of this valley?" Vane's smile sharpened. "This settlement violates territorial law. Unauthorized occupation of federal land, harboring fugitives, practicing unnatural arts. I've been authorized to disperse it with appropriate force." The warmth inside Lena surged, flowing through her limbs like liquid fire. She sensed the villagers taking aim, bows drawn, rifles steady, waiting for her signal. But something deeper was unfolding, something beyond soldiers and defenders. "You want to know what's unnatural, Colonel?" Lena stepped forward, and Vane's horse shied beneath him. "Hunting women and children because they can heal the sick, or find water in the desert. Branding a woman as a witch because she knows things that frighten ignorant men." "Careful, Miss Cross," Vane warned. "Your emotions are showing." "Good." Lena raised her voice, and it echoed with a resonance that made several Iron Spur troopers shift uneasily in their saddles. "Let me tell you about the women you've collected. Let me tell you their names." The words came to her without effort, rising from the same deep place as her healing knowledge. Ember, taken from her people 2 winters ago. She spoke with animals, healed with her hands. Grace Holloway, stolen near Tucson. She found what was lost. She saw truth in men's hearts. Rosa Vale, who called rain in times of drought. With each name, the power within Lena grew. The painted symbols flared brighter, and the air shimmered with heat that had nothing to do with the sun. "Where are they, Colonel?" Lena demanded. "What did you do with them?" For the first time, Vane's composure fractured. "That information is classified." "They're dead," Lena said, stepping forward again. This time Vane's horse backed away, despite his grip on the reins. "You took their gifts, dissected them, tried to control what you stole, and when you couldn't, you destroyed it. The needs of civilization require difficult sacrifices," Vane said, but the certainty had drained from his voice. "Civilization?" Lena laughed, and the sound cut the air like breaking glass. "Is that what you call burning women as witches? Stealing children from their families? Crushing anything that doesn't fit your narrow idea of order?" She lifted her hands. The symbols blazed with brilliant light. Around the canyon, the land itself began to stir, ancient forces waking in stone and spring, answering a voice carried by the right blood and the right knowing. "You want to see what a witch can do, Colonel?" Lena said. The canyon temperature climbed. Horses screamed and reared. Riders fought for control. Several soldiers raised their rifles, but Vane snapped up a hand to stop them. "I know what you're thinking," Lena continued, her voice now heavy with command. "You think power like mine must be owned, or destroyed." She took one more step forward, the valley holding its breath. "You think I'm just one woman," Lena Cross said steadily, "that your men can put a bullet through me and be finished. That's where you're wrong about what I am." The light around her deepened, thickened, and when she spoke again, her voice carried an echo, layered with the presence of women who had stood before her, healers and watchers and protectors who had stepped forward when no one else would. "I am the daughter of Mara Cross, whose mother was called River, whose mother was named Starfall. I carry the blood of women who spoke with spirits when men like you still feared thunder. I am Ash, the one who walks between fire and shadow, and I am done being afraid." The canyon answered her. Stone split with sharp spiderweb cracks, as if the rock itself bristled at her anger. Behind the ranks of the Iron Spur troopers, pack animals screamed and tore loose, bolting back down the pass. Colonel Silas Vane drew his pistol, but his hand betrayed him, shaking. "You're just one woman," he said again, the words sounding thin even to his own ears. "Am I?" Lena lifted her hand toward the canyon walls. The people of the valley stepped into view, no longer hidden, no longer bowed. Miguel Reyes, whose presence could calm any horse or still a rising storm. Sky, who could find water where none should exist and call rain from empty sky. Rowan, whose healing knowledge rivaled that of any trained doctor. Elder Dawn, keeper of the old paths, carrying memory forward like a living flame. As Lena named them, Their gifts stirred. Miguel's horses stood quiet amid chaos. A cool wind curled around Sky, easing the heat. Light glimmered in Rowan's hands, the same healing glow that had once lived in Lena's mother. "We are not specimens," Lena said, her voice filling the canyon. "We are not threats to be erased. We are keepers of balance between the world you know and the one you fear." Fear rippled through the soldiers. Horses backed away. Even the turned scouts shifted uneasily, eyes flicking between Vane and the woman wreathed in living light. "Stand down, Colonel," Lena said, and for the first time compassion softened the force in her voice. "Take your men and leave. Enough blood has been spilled in the name of fear." Vane's jaw tightened. She could see him measuring cost and consequence, pride weighed against an enemy he no longer understood. At last, calculation won. "This isn't finished," he said, holstering his weapon. "The territory won't tolerate unlawful settlements forever." "Perhaps," Lena replied, "but it won't tolerate hunting the innocent anymore either. Choose carefully which side of that change you stand on." Vane spun his horse and shouted orders. Within minutes, the column withdrew, leaving only dust and the hollow echo of hooves. As the sound faded, the power drained from Lena's body, leaving her exhausted but calm. Hawk came to her side, his expression holding something deeper than awe. "That was—" He stopped, unable to finish. "That was necessary," Elder Dawn said, joining them, "and it was only the beginning." Lena watched the desert swallow the retreating soldiers. The clash with Vane had been one battle. The larger struggle, the right to exist as they truly were, still lay ahead. Yet for the first time since leaving Cedar Ridge, she felt ready. 3 months passed. The hidden valley settled into a fragile, hopeful rhythm. Word spread across the margins. Apache bands, displaced Mexican families, freed people seeking safety, wanderers carrying news. Some came for refuge, others to trade. All brought the same whisper. Something in the balance was shifting. In quiet moments, Lena still thought of herself by her old name. Yet ash fit her now as naturally as breath. She spent her days learning beside Elder Dawn and the other keepers. Her gifts sharpened. Illness revealed itself before it bloomed. Barren soil stirred to life. Truth showed in a person's eyes. But evenings were what she cherished most. When the work was done, and she sat beside the stream with Hawk, their bond deepened into something unnamed, felt more than spoken. A steady warmth beneath the surface of their days. "You're restless," Hawk said one night as the first autumn chill touched the air. He shaped a new bow, hands moving with patient skill. Lena looked up from the herbs she was sorting by firelight, the water whispering nearby. "Elder Dawn says the signs are clear. Changes are coming, and we won't be able to outrun them much longer." "What kind of changes?" Hawk asked. "The railroad is pushing farther into the territory," Lena Cross said. "New settlements keep springing up. More troops are being posted along the frontier." She set aside the bundle of dried sage she'd been studying. "The world is shrinking. Places like this valley won't stay hidden forever." Hawk's hands paused on the bough he was shaping. "Are you afraid?" Lena surprised herself with the honesty of her answer. "No, not afraid, uncertain. About what comes next. About whether we'll be strong enough to protect what we've built here. We drove Colonel Silas Vane away, but that was one fight. The struggle ahead is bigger." She stepped to the edge of the firelight, where darkness murmured with both promise and threat. "Elder Dawn thinks I should leave soon. Travel to where our people are scattered. Help them organize. Help them find their strength the way I found mine." Hawk rose and stood beside her, close enough that she felt his warmth. "And what do you think?" "I think she's right," Lena said, then turned to him, seeing her own conflict mirrored in his eyes. And I think I'm afraid to leave, not because of danger, but because of what I might lose." They stood in silence, words unspoken but heavy. Hawk lifted his hand slowly, gently touching her cheek. "You won't lose what truly matters," he said. "Some things travel with you, no matter how far you go." Before she could answer, voices erupted near the valley entrance. Not cries of alarm, but shouts of welcome, laced with disbelief and joy. Riders were threading their way up the canyon, horses picking careful paths through stone. "These aren't soldiers," Lena said. The lead rider was a woman, long hair streaming as she urged her mount forward. Hawk caught his breath. Ember, the woman once believed lost to Vane's cruelty, rode into the firelight like someone returned from the grave. She was leaner than Hawk remembered, marked by suffering, but alive. 4 other women followed, each bearing the unmistakable signs of captivity and escape. Ember slid from her horse, and Hawk wrapped her in his arms, both speaking rapidly in Apache, tears cutting paths through dust and exhaustion. Villagers hurried in with food, water, and the quiet assurance of safety. "How?" Hawk asked at last, switching to English. "We thought you were dead. All of you." "We were meant to be," Ember said, her voice rough but unbroken. "Vane kept us in a compound near Fort Huachuca. He studied us, tried to pull our gifts apart, turn them into tools. When that failed, he decided we were too dangerous to live." Rosa Vale stepped forward. "He underestimated what we could do together." "No. When word reached us about what happened here," said another woman, Catherine Moonbeam, "about a woman who faced him down and made him retreat, it gave us hope and a plan." As the night deepened, the story unfolded, of courage, sacrifice, and unity. The women had woven their abilities together, confusing guards, warping iron, opening a path to freedom no one believed possible. "But Vane isn't finished," Ember warned around the central fire. "He's more determined than ever, and he isn't working alone." "What do you mean?" Elder Dawn asked, her face grave in the flames. "There are men from back east," Rosa said bitterly. "Clean suits. Big words about national security, the Indian problem, and order. To them, our gifts are weapons, or threats to be erased." "Then we claim our own ground," Lena said, standing, her certainty surprising even herself. "Elder Dawn is right. We can't hide forever. We have to be strong enough to protect ourselves, and others like us." Hawk rose beside her. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying it's time we stop reacting," Lena replied, her voice steady. "Time to act. Time to find everyone who carries gifts like ours, and help them understand who they are. Help them learn to handle their gifts with care, safely, responsibly." Lena let her gaze travel around the circle, reading the same resolve reflected back at her. It was time to build something larger than one hidden valley. Time to build a network. Rowan spoke first, thoughtful. A web of healers and seers, people who listen to spirits, connected, supporting each other. "More than that," Elder Dawn added, her eyes bright with hard-earned hope. "A new way of living in a world that's changing, not hiding from those who fear us, but not threatening them either. Showing them our gifts are meant to mend, not destroy." The debate stretched deep into the night. Plans formed, broke apart, and formed again as they wrestled with the size of what they were proposing. By dawn, the bones of it were set. Safe houses and contact points, quiet ways of finding those with gifts, methods of training, and rules for handling hostile authorities. But what Lena remembered most came after the others finally drifted to rest. She and Hawk walked through the pre-dawn hush, their feet carrying them without thought to the stream where so many of their evenings had ended. Water whispered over stones worn smooth by time. When Hawk spoke, his voice was low and steady. "When you leave, I want to go with you. Lena's heart jolted. It'll be dangerous. More dangerous than anything we've faced. I know. Hawk stopped and turned fully toward her. His eyes held something raw beneath the calm. But I also know I can't watch you ride out alone. Not with so much at stake. He drew a breath, as if gathering the courage for words that had been waiting months. Not when I love you too much to let you face the dark without someone beside you. The words hung between them like a bridge. Lena's eyes stung. Not from sorrow, but from a joy so deep it threatened to spill her open. She reached up, touching his face the way he had touched hers so many times, gentle and sure. Hawk, she whispered. I love you too. I have for months. I was just afraid. Of what? He asked softly. Afraid love would make me weak, Lena admitted. Afraid it would give me something to lose I couldn't survive losing. She stepped closer, her hand still on his cheek. But facing Colonel Silas Vane, seeing what we did together, what the women did by standing as one, I don't think love makes us weak at all. Hawk's arms wrapped around her waist. No, he said, voice thick with truth. It makes us stronger. He kissed her, gentle at first, then deeper, more certain, as months of unspoken feeling finally broke free. When they pulled apart, both were breathing hard, and the eastern sky was paling with the first hint of sunrise. There's something I want to do, Hawk said, quiet but determined. Something I've been thinking about. What? Lena asked. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he stepped behind her and carefully lifted the back of her shirt. Lena stiffened on instinct. The scars were healed, but some old part of her still flinched from being seen. Hawk, you don't have to. Yes, he said softly. I do. His voice held no pity, only reverence. Because these scars are part of who you are. They're part of what made you strong enough to stand in that canyon and give hope to women like my sister. They are not shame, Ash. They're proof. His fingertips traced the raised letters with infinite care. Lena's breath shook. Tears slid down her face as he pressed a kiss to her skin. Then another. Then another. Slowly, deliberately, along every scar. The brand had once been a sentence. Under Hawk's mouth, it became something else entirely, an oath, a witness mark, a testament. She had walked through fire and lived. You're beautiful, Hawk murmured against her back. All of you, especially the parts they tried to ruin. When he'd kissed every letter, every ridge of scar tissue, he turned her to face him and pulled her close. The sun crested the cliffs, spilling gold and rose across the canyon walls. Somewhere behind them, the village began to stir, waking to another day. Whatever comes, Hawk said, voice firm with certainty, we face it together. Together, Lena answered, and the words settled into her bones like something unbreakable. They stood in the growing light, two people who had found each other in the harshest country, who had learned that love could bloom even in dry ground, that scars could become strength instead of shame. The road ahead would be long. There would be other fights, other lives to pull back from the edge, other enemies to face. But in Hawk's arms, feeling his steady heartbeat and the warmth of morning on her face, Lena knew they were ready. She was no longer the frightened woman branded in Cedar Ridge's dust. She was Ash, walker between fire and shadow, keeper of the old ways, protector of those with nowhere else to turn, and she was loved, fully and fiercely, by a man who saw her worth when the world only saw something to fear. The scar would never vanish, but it no longer owned her. Under Hawk's kiss, it became what it was always meant to become. Proof of transformation. Finally, let me send my deep thanks to you. We appreciate you more than you think. If this tale stirred something deep inside, we invite you to remain part of this frontier of memories. More true stories of honor, compassion, and destiny are waiting for you here. Subscribe, share, comment, and thank you for riding with us today. Aviso legal. Disclaimer: our content is designed for artistic and entertainment purposes and may reinterpret historical themes using fictional touches. We apply AI tools thoughtfully, only to support production, while keeping human supervision over editing, emotional tone, and narrative coherence. We always comply with regulatory guidelines for AI-based media and avoid deepfake practices or identity manipulation. All supporting components remain legally sourced. Please ask for authorization before sharing or adapting any segment. Your respect makes it possible for us to continue telling meaningful stories.